The Melodious Engine is a typically 8-card engine that when uninterrupted can get you to go +6 or higher in card advantage. It sets up 1 in 9 scales for pendulum summoning light monsters, and it gets you access to an omni negate, 2 monster negates through Appaloosa, and access to a rank 2 or generic rank 4. Typical options can include any of the generic searchers, something like Dugaris, SP Little Knight, IP Masquerena. Alternatively, if you choose to forgo the Omni Negate, your options are now open to any rank 7 in the game, something like the Pearly rank 7s, Kashira Shangri-Ira, Arsenal Falcon. This also means you could do combo lines with cards like Dracossack, creating 2 tokens in order to make a Cherubini, which lets you send any level 3 from your deck to the graveyard. You could also choose to not go for a rank 7 at all, and instead get access to a level 6 that is a one-time DD Crow for 3 cards. The options are as wild as your imagination can take you. The main cards that enable this combo are pendulum monsters, so let me break them down for you in an easy to understand way. Refrain the Melodious Songstress is the most important monster for this engine. It can do a smaller version of this combo just on its own, but I'm not going to go over that in this video. When Refrain is summoned, it has a once per turn effect to search for any Melodious monster other than itself. It has an additional monster effect that if it's in your extra deck face up and you summon a Melodious Fusion monster, it can place itself in your pendulum scale. Refrain's pendulum effect is a pretty simple one. If it's in the scale, you can target a Melodious Fusion you control, send a Melodious monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then increase that monster's attack by 200 for each level of the monster you sent. Couplet the Melodious Songstress is considered to be the brick of this engine. It's mandatory to play one for the combo, but it's not something you necessarily want to draw. Similar to how you have to play one Fateful Adventure, but it's not great if you draw into it. Like Refrain, Couplet has 2 monster effects and 1 pendulum effect. If Couplet is added to your hand in any way other than for your normal draw, you can reveal it and summon a level 4 or lower Melodious monster from your hand or graveyard. Couplet also has the same effect as Refrain, where if it's in your extra deck and you summon a Melodious Fusion, it can scale itself. Couplet's pendulum effect lets you add 1 Melodious spell or trap from your deck to your hand, provided that if you control any monsters, they have to be Melodious monsters. Couplet also has the restriction that you're only able to pendulum summon light monsters, so not every deck can make use of the free access to this mechanic. The third monster is Baka the Melodious Maestra. This is the fusion monster that really lets this engine pop off. When it's special summoned, it has an effect that lets you summon any Melodious monster from your deck. If it's sent to the graveyard, you can reborn any Melodious monster other than Baka. It has the additional ability that while it's on the field, the activated effects of Melodious Fusion monsters cannot be negated. This means it can't be negated by cards like Ash Blossom or Appaloosa. Keep in mind that cards like Effect Veiler or Skill Drain will negate this card because they negate the entire effect, including the effect that protects its activated effects from being negated. That's it for the Melodious monsters you'll see in these combos. There are 2 more that see some fringe play that I'll go over after, so make sure to stick around to the end of the video to see what all the options are. There are 2 spells that go along with these monsters. The first is Melodious Concerto. This is a fusion spell that lets you summon 1 Fairy Fusion using monsters from your hand, field, or pendulum zones. It has the additional effect that if it's in the graveyard and a Melodious Fusion is sent to the graveyard, you can put it on the bottom of your deck and draw a card. This final spell is the one that really gives this engine the oomph you've been hearing about. Ostinato. Every card that fuses using monster from the deck is eventually broken, and this is a clear example. If you control no monsters, you can fusion summon a Melodious Fusion using monsters from your hand or deck as the material. During the end phase of this turn, the fusion monster will be destroyed, and then you have the option to bring back the materials you used if they're in your graveyard. It's important to point out that this is all one effect, so you can have your Ostinato negated with a card like Ghost Bell. Something even more important to point out is that this card is old. It is not future-proofed. There is no once per turn clause, so if you have 3 in your hand, you can activate all 3 as long as you don't control any monsters each time you try to activate it. This means negating it with cards like Ash Blossom and Ghost Bell are very risky, because if your opponent has another one, they will punish you. Now for the most important part of the video. How does it combo? The most basic and explosive combo will always start with Ostinato. You activate this card and send 2 copies of Refrain from your deck to the graveyard in order to summon Baka. When Baka is summoned, it'll trigger its effect to summon the 3rd Refrain from our deck. On the summon of Refrain, we'll get to search for any Melodious monster. Here we'll pick up a copy of Couplet. Now that we've added Couplet to our hand, we can trigger its effect to summon a level 4 or lower Melodious from our hand or grave. In this case, we'll pick up one of the free refrains we used for the fusion summon back from the graveyard. Next, we scale up the Couplet and use its other effect to add a Melodious Concerto to our hand. Then we activate the Concerto, fusing one of our refrains on the field, and the Couplet in our scale for a second Baka. Since we summoned a Melodious Fusion, now we get to trigger both of our Pendulum monsters in the extra deck and put them back in our scales. That's the main combo. It doesn't look like a ton from here, but that's because we're not finished yet. That line is the standard start and it will always look that way. But from here, it depends what the rest of your deck is trying to accomplish for how we'll deviate. You'll notice now that we have 2 level 7s on the field, so before we start link climbing, we'll probably be making a rank 7. Good options here are Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon, if you want an Omni negate, Dracossack if you want access to a level 3 from your deck, Raid Raptor Arsenal Falcon, or any other rank 7 that might be specific to what your deck aims to accomplish. I'm only going to expand on the Odd Eyes, Dracossack, and rank 4 routes in this video, otherwise it would be way too long and you'd be very overwhelmed. First, let's review the Odd Eyes line. For this line, we'll begin by overlaying for an Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. Next, we'll link off the Odd Eyes and the refrain for any link to that doesn't lock you into any summoning conditions. Popular options here are IP Masquerena, SP Little Knight, or Cross Sheep. We'll be using this to link climb, so just keep that in mind, it's not sticking around. This link summon is going to trigger a ton of effects. We'll get to use Odd Eyes as Chainlink 1 to summon another Odd Eyes monster from our extra deck, Baka as Chainlink 2 to get back our 3rd refrain from the graveyard, and Concerto as Chainlink 3 to put itself back in our deck and net us a free draw. At this point, we've now replaced the one card we used to start this whole combo off, so anything else we do is just free card advantage. Now keep in mind, the Chainlinks only matter if you plan on using the effect of the Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. Because it's a 1 effect, it will miss timing if it's not summoned as Chainlink 1. If you use Cross Sheep as your Link 2, you also have the option to reborn any level 4 or lower from your graveyard, since we can just summon the Vortex Dragon to a zone it points to. Continuing on, we'll link the refrain and the Link 2 into a copy of Exceed the Pendulum. This monster has 2 important effects. The first is that when it's summoned, we can add a Pendulum monster from our extra deck to our hand, so we'll just be grabbing back one of the refrains we used earlier. The other effect is that once per turn, as a quick effect during the main phase, we can summon any Pendulum from our hand or graveyard that has a level between our scales. If you use Beyond the Pendulum as your Link 2 of choice, you can do some cute stuff with the newly unbanned Magispector Kiran, but that deviates pretty far from the standard combo, so I'll just leave that to you to figure out. Instead, we're just going to use its effect to summon back the refrain we just added to our hand. Now we can link summon one more time using the Exceed and the refrain to make an Appaloosa for 2 monster negates. At this point, you can Pendulum summon at minimum the 2 refrains and more monsters from your hand if they're light. These 2 refrains can be linked off for any Link 2, such as another IP or SP, and that's it. That's where this line ends. Off of 1 Ostinato, you now have 2 monster negates with Appaloosa, 1 Omni negate that you can use twice by shuffling back your refrains, and 1 IP or SP or whichever Link 2 you chose to interrupt your opponent. Now let's go over the Dracossack line. Instead of making it Odd Eyes, here we're just going to make a Dracossack. Now we can use the Dracossack effect to summon 2 level 3 tokens, and this will let us trigger our Baka that we detached to bring back a refrain as Chainlink 1 and our Concerto as Chainlink 2 to net us a free draw. Then we can use these 2 tokens to make a Cherubini, which will let us send any level 3 from our deck to the graveyard. Some decks that can make really good use of this are something like Phantom Knights or Fire decks that have level 3 monsters, such as the new Tempai Dragon deck. If you go for something like Phantom Knights, it's now a line that leads to Rusty and Fogblades just like they used to back when they were a meta threat. I'll be using Tempai for the rest of this explanation. Here, we can send a Pydra from our deck to the graveyard, and then we can link the Dracossack and the Cherubini for a Promethean Princess. This will let us reborn a Pydra and get us a search to get access to our Tempai engine. We can then link the Pydra and the Princess for an Amblo Whale, and then link our Amblo Whale and the 2 refrains into Exceed the Pendulum. Similar to before, we add back a refrain and summon it, linking again into Appaloosa for 2. Note that alternatively, you could have made a Raging Phoenix, instead allowing for a follow-up OTK using Zelantis and the Princess that we made earlier. Once we've done that, we can safely Pendulum summon our 2 refrains, and either make an IP, SP, or any rank 4, such as Baguska or Dugaris, and that's where this line ends. As you can see, these combos are incredibly strong. Adding consistency to your deck if you utilize rank 4s like the ones here on screen, while also providing your board with some huge presence that cannot be ignored. If your deck doesn't make great use of rank 7s, you can instead choose to make a Schuberta the Melodious Maestra as your second fusion. You're still able to link climb the way you do in the combos I showed you, but now you end with a quick effect DD Crow for 3 cards. I'd recommend using this over a second Baka if all you care about is making the link to rank 4 at the end, as you won't be needing to keep your refrains in the extra deck for the Odd Eyes, Vortex, Dragon, Negate. If you're playing a fusion deck, I'd highly recommend playing an additional Melodious monster in your main deck. Tamtam the Melodious Diva adds a polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand when it's special summoned. It also gives you an option for time, because if it's used as a fusion material, say from Ostinato, you can burn your opponent for 500. If you want to know more about Tamtam combos, be sure to check out my other videos. I just won the Toronto Regionals using it in combination with the Chimera cards, so this isn't just me blowing hot air about how good it can be. Similar to the Adventure Engine that took Yugioh by storm back in 2022, the Melodious cards are extremely splashable. Any deck that has 8 to 10 flex spots in their main deck and a couple free extra deck slots can make great use of these new cards. If your deck is really fragile and can't deal with hand traps well, I would highly recommend giving this engine a try. Getting access to a couple negates before you even commit your normal summon makes playing modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Significantly easier. Yu-Gi-Oh! Can be a really expensive hobby to enjoy, but it doesn't have to stay that way in order for you to compete. Almost everything in these combos comes as common. Apollousa and IP just got some new reprints with the Rarity Collection too, and all of the Melodious cards are commons. If you were to buy this engine right now, here's the current prices of all the main cards you'll need. When the Adventure Engine came out, it was anywhere from $300 to $500 depending on when you bought it during its prime, and if you remember, it was literally everywhere. In comparison, this engine is so much more explosive and can definitely win games all on its own. You are basically playing the same amount of stars and bricks for a significantly better payoff in this day and age. So, what are your thoughts on this engine? Do you think it'll see widespread play like Adventure did? Or is this all just a lot of theory that's not going to translate into results? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.